July 19th, 1989, 37,000 feet over Iowa. A DC-10 is carrying 296 people from Denver to Chicago. At 3:16 in the afternoon, the tail engine tears itself apart. In the next 4 seconds, shrapnel from the disintegrating engine severs every hydraulic line on the aircraft. No ailerons, no rudder, no elevators, no flaps, no brakes. The pilots move their controls. Nothing happens. For the next 44 minutes, 4 men will attempt something that has never been done before and has never been successfully repeated since. This is United Airlines Flight 232. On the afternoon of July 19th, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 departed Stapleton International Airport in Denver, Colorado, bound for Chicago O'Hare, with continuing service to Philadelphia. On board, 285 passengers and 11 crew members, 296 people in total. The aircraft was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10-10, a wide-body trijet first introduced in 1971. At the time of the accident, the aircraft had logged 43,401 flight hours and 15,503 flight cycles. It was, by any measure, a mature aircraft with a long and uneventful service history. The crew were experienced. Captain Alfred C. Haynes had 33 years with United Airlines. First Officer William Records was the pilot flying that afternoon. Flight engineer Dudley Dvorak monitored the aircraft's systems from behind the 2 pilots. There was a 4th person in the cockpit that afternoon, not because he was scheduled to be there, but because of a coincidence that likely saved dozens of lives. Captain Dennis Fitch, a DC-10 flight instructor for United, was traveling as a dead-hating passenger. He was sitting in first class when the engine failed. At 15:16 CDT, climbing through 37,000 feet in a shallow right turn, the number 2 engine, mounted in the tail, tore itself apart. To understand what made this accident so catastrophic and so improbable, you need to understand how hydraulics work on a large commercial aircraft. On a DC-10, hydraulic fluid under pressure is what moves every primary flight control surface. The ailerons that control roll, the elevators that control pitch, the rudder that controls yaw. Without hydraulic pressure, the pilots cannot move any of these surfaces. The yoke and the rudder pedals become decorative. The DC-10 had 3 completely independent hydraulic systems, a design specifically intended to prevent any single failure from disabling all controls. Lose one system, you still have 2. Lose 2, you still have 1. The probability of losing all 3 simultaneously had been calculated at 1 in a billion. On Flight 232, the Stage 1 fan disc of the number 2 engine, a titanium alloy disc spinning at approximately 3,600 RPM, fractured catastrophically. The disc had been manufactured 17 years earlier. It contained a metallurgical defect, a hard alpha inclusion, that had never been detected in 6 separate fluorescent penetrant inspections over its service life. When the disc shattered, the fragments were hurled outward with enough energy to penetrate the aircraft's tail section. The hydraulic lines for all 3 systems ran through the same area of the tail, a common cause vulnerability that the designers had not anticipated as a realistic failure scenario. Within seconds, all 3 hydraulic systems lost pressure. Every flight control surface on the aircraft froze. The DC-10 was now flying on aerodynamics alone, and no one was steering it. Captain Haynes and First Officer Records immediately moved their controls. Nothing responded. Flight engineer Dvorak checked the hydraulic gauges. All hydraulic quantity, 0. All 3 systems. There was no checklist for this. There was no simulator scenario. McDonnell Douglas had not written a procedure for complete hydraulic failure because the probability had been calculated as effectively impossible. The aircraft was in a phugoid, a series of long, oscillating pitch and bank cycles that, without correction, would eventually spiral it into the ground. It was turning right, slowly and continuously, with no way to stop it. Captain Fitch, hearing the explosion from first class, made his way to the cockpit. He asked if he could help. Haynes told him to get on the throttles. What followed was an improvisation unlike anything in aviation history. Fitch, working the two remaining wing-mounted engines with both hands, discovered that by running one engine faster than the other, he could produce a crude yaw, a turn. By accelerating or decelerating both engines together, he could produce rough pitch changes, climbs and descents. It was imprecise. It was unpredictable. The aircraft still oscillated in long, sickening cycles, but it was something. Haynes later described what it felt like. You're trying to fly a 180-ton jet with two throttle levers. It's like trying to balance on a beach ball. They had 44 minutes to figure out how to land it. Air traffic control cleared every runway at Sioux Gateway Airport in Sioux City, Iowa, the nearest airport with emergency services capable of handling a wide-body aircraft. Iowa Air National Guard personnel on duty that afternoon, 285 trained emergency responders, were activated. Every fire truck in northwestern Iowa was rolling. Inside the cockpit, the four pilots worked the problem methodically. Haynes coordinated with ATC. Records backed up Fitch on the controls. Dvorak monitored every remaining system and ran emergency checklists that had not been designed for this situation. Fitch later said the closest thing in his experience was trying to fly an aircraft while someone else is shaking it. The fugoid continued. Every time they managed to correct one axis, another would drift. They could not control their airspeed with any precision. They could not deploy flaps to slow down for the approach. The landing gear had to be lowered by gravity. Dvorak pulled the emergency release and the gear fell and locked into position. As they approached the airport, Haynes told ATC what he could and couldn't promise.
We have no steering, no brakes, no flaps, no spoilers, and no elevator control. We're doing our best. ATC responded by clearing runway 31. But at the last moment, a right turn that Fitch could not fully correct sent the aircraft drifting toward runway 22 instead. They had no ability to correct it. At 1600 CDT, Flight 232 crossed the runway threshold at approximately 240 knots, nearly twice the normal landing speed, with a right bank of about 20 degrees.
The right wingtip struck the runway first. The aircraft cartwheeled, breaking apart across the runway and adjacent cornfield. The fuselage broke into sections. Fire broke out immediately. Of the 296 people on board, 111 were killed, 110 passengers and one flight attendant. 185 people survived. The survival rate, 62%, was considered extraordinary given the circumstances. The NTSB later noted that expert simulator crews, given the same scenario, almost never produced a survivable landing. Most never made it to the airport at all. Captain Haynes, in the years after the accident, was consistent about one thing. He did not consider himself a hero. He said the survival of 185 people was due to the performance of the entire crew and to factors beyond anyone's control. The accident occurred during daylight in good weather. It occurred during a shift change at Sioux City's trauma centers, which doubled the medical staff on hand. The Iowa Air National Guard was on duty. Had any of those things not been there, Haynes said, the fatality rate would have been much higher.
The NTSB's final report, published in November 1990, identified two distinct failure chains that converged on Flight 232. The first was manufacturing. The fan disc contained a hard alpha inclusion, a metallurgical defect introduced during production that had never been detected by any of 6 inspections over 17 years of service. The NTSB recommended mandatory improvements to titanium alloy inspection methods and a complete overhaul of quality control procedures for critical engine components. The second was design. The hydraulic lines of all 3 independent systems ran through the same area of the tail. A single uncontained engine failure could and did sever all 3 at once. The DC-10's redundancy, which seemed comprehensive on paper, had a single point of failure that no one had adequately considered. New aircraft designs are now required to route redundant hydraulic systems through physically separated paths.
The concept of propulsion-controlled aircraft, deliberately flying on throttle input alone as an emergency procedure, became a formal area of research following Sioux City. It is now a studied and trained emergency option in both military and civilian aviation programs.
And crew resource management, the systematic training of flight crews to work as a team, share information, and challenge assumptions, was already a relatively new concept in 1989. Sioux City became the defining case study for what CRM looked like under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The NTSB specifically credited CRM as a contributing factor in the survival of 185 people. Captain Haynes spent the rest of his life giving lectures on crew resource management and human factors. He died in 2019 at the age of 87.
There is something Captain Haynes said in one of his later lectures that aviation safety researchers have quoted many times since. He said, "The crew of United 232 did not do anything heroic. We did what we were trained to do, except there was no training for this, so we did the best we could with what we had." That is the lesson of Sioux City. Not that extraordinary individuals can overcome impossible situations, though sometimes they can. The lesson is that when systems fail, what saves lives is the quality of the team, the clarity of communication, and the willingness to keep working the problem until there are no more options left. 4 pilots, 2 throttle levers, 44 minutes, 185 reasons why you never give up. If you want to understand how aviation built the safety net that keeps you alive every time you fly, one investigation at a time, subscribe. We'll be back next week. The concept of propulsion-controlled aircraft, deliberately flying on throttle input alone as an emergency procedure, became a formal area of research following Sioux City. It is now a studied and trained emergency option in both military and civilian aviation programs.